So today, within quick 20 minutes in my opening note, I will try to draw your attention more to the broader level of the issue of our Summer Academy. I'd like you to have a bit of a ego perspective and a bit perhaps more theoretical or conceptual thought about it. I know my main interest actually lies in how these concepts that have been mentioned here, how these are all related. We've been talking about values. We've been mentioning cultural policy quite a little, actually. That's why I'm going to talk more about it today. And institutional setting, organizational management, societal impact of the arts. So my focus is on how these concepts are related. Is there a relationship, and what is this relationship? My PhD topic is actually how the change of institutional setting affects the social impact of cultural organizations, more precisely the foundations in the cultural field. What does it do to the organization and its social impact? So if you would pretend yourself or imagine yourself to be I don't know, leading cultural politician of your country, what if you would be a policy maker in the cultural field? What would you think about social impact of the arts? What would be your concerns about the social impact of the arts? You're a cultural politician. You have to bear in mind that the aim of the cultural policy is to regulate the relationships between government and the cultural organizations, to regulate the different interests between state, market, and civil society, which is like third sector or even fourth sector, as we heard before. You can read about this triangle, state, market, civil society, more from Jürgen Habermas. But as a cultural politician, your main focus would be how to balance the different interests between private and public sector. Do you have any good examples? What are the conflicting interests between private and public sector in the cultural field? Do you have any examples? What could it be? For example, if you have in the middle of a city center very nice historical house, which is under cultural heritage protection, and there are some businessmen who would like to use it as a hotel because it's in a very, very sweet spot in the city. So on one hand, there's a private interest, which we also understand, and on the other hand, there's a public interest because we want this building to remain as it is. But it couldn't be perhaps used as a hotel as it is. It should be changed or enlarged or a bit ruined. So as a cultural politician, your aim would be to balance, to regulate the field so that both sides would be happy, but you have to keep your aim as a cultural politician in your mind. And the way how you could balance the difference and conflicting interests is that you have to develop and choose the principles, the strategies. You have to find out the tools, how to balance them, and the tools could be, for example, taxing, pricing policy. You could change the legislation that regulates how much private sector has a right to deal with the cultural heritage and things like that. So cultural legislation is one of your tools to regulate the field and to create a flourishing environment for the safe protection and development of cultural fields, right? You also, one of the most powerful tools you have is, of course, the funding policy, the public funds that you'll be able to decide how they're shared, and expressing the national cultural policy priorities. Another thing you could do is you could design the whole institutional setting of cultural field. And with institutional setting, I mean not institution equal to organization, but institution as a whole, like a general term, like a broader term. Institutional setting means that how all the relationships and organizations are arranged in the field. In this sense, what are the rules of the game of the whole cultural scene what we have. Yeah. So if you imagine yourself as a cultural politician, this is all in your hands. You're quite responsible on that, right? Does any of you have an ambition to become a cultural politician? Yeah, good. So now
from the diplomatic side, not from the governmental side.
Yeah, but still, probably the most of the topics we've just discussed here will be on your table then as well. But being a cultural politician, you probably notice quite soon that you're not alone. In most cases, the cultural policy is affected by other governmental policies. The slides does not go as they should be, but there are some all kind of different governmental policies affect cultural policy as well. And one thing that affects many of the European or even global policies is neoliberalism. I don't know, have you heard of it? But it's especially actual in the context of economic crisis. Neoliberalism means that it actually prioritizes the free market economy, applying the market mechanisms even in the public sector. It states that anything that is good for business is good for public. So it's the general kind of belief or understanding that even in culture, minimum state intervention is good. The most liberal cultural politicians believe that the public provision of cultural goods and services should be questioned at all. Let the cultural field operate as any other business under free market economy principles. So neoliberal policy stresses the importance and strengths of privatization, for example, outsourcing and public-private partnerships. But in culture, it actually means that culture is capitalized. On one hand, you can understand that more money means more mission, right? But on the other hand, applying the market mechanisms to cultural field means, of course, what? Commercialization, and it has its dark sides as well. So it's not so simple. But if we put this neoliberal approach towards cultural policy to the Holden value theory, I don't know if it's actually a theory, I guess it's like a cultural value system or model by Holden, which was in your articles as well. If we put this cultural policy and neoliberalism to this context, we could see that it is actually the instrumental value that is prioritized in the neoliberalistic approach, right? Instrumental value of culture means that culture and arts is used as an instrument to achieve non-artistic or non-cultural goals. This is the same thing that we've been talking about here the whole week, is that art could be used or seen as a tool to achieve social cohesion. Yeah, we use it as an instrument. So this is actually instrumental approach, and instrumental approach also stresses the economic outcome of culture. Instrumental value is something that is measured in numbers, in monetary units. But not only, also for some urban regeneration, really social cohesion, whatever non-artistic purposes it is used for. And most of the time, politicians are mostly interested in stressing the instrumental value of culture. On the other hand, it's really difficult to prove whether we receive the better social cohesion because of the cultural intervention. It is difficult to prove that the arts is the most effective way to get the economics in one city like blooming. It is hard. But as a cultural politician, you have to understand that, as Holden already stated, is that the instrumental value is not the whole picture. Actually, you have to be aware that even if you stress the instrumental value and if you consider the priority of culture, there are also intrinsic and institutional value of culture. This, even if you don't want to recognize them, they are there, and this is the whole picture. Intrinsic value is the thing that we've been talking about here. It's the arts for art's sake. Yeah, it is kind of a individual, subjective, aesthetic, emotional, intellectual, spiritual experience that we get. If you as a cultural politician think that, okay, art is good because it helps to it benefits to the economics of our city, then probably you as an audience would never go to a gallery because you think that, oh, it's good for my city economics if I go there. You probably want to go to arts events because you hope to get some like human touch. You hope to get a good experience. You hope to feel something you've never felt before, right? So most of the audience values mostly the intrinsic value of arts and culture. Institutional value of culture is about the norms and the traditions and then the rules, how things are arranged in the cultural scene, in this sense that some cultural organizations do not only provide the intrinsic value and instrumental value, but they are there because it's important for us to have the whole structure, the whole system of cultural organizations that we always have had, because this is the norm how our cultural field is established and running. So as a cultural politician, you might want to overlook this, but usually it would be wise to recognize these different values. So if you think of the institutional setting, and from the cultural politician perspective, what would be logical for you to do, and what would be logical to happen, or what actually has happened in Europe in the context of neoliberalism in cultural policy, in the context of valuing instrumental side of culture the most? What would be logical for cultural politicians to do? How could they use their tools according to this context? What is logical and what has obviously happened all over Europe is that the institutional setting has been changed towards more private sector-like solutions. There has been transformations where cultural organizations have been changed into private sector organizations. In many cases, there are foundations, like in Estonia, but also in Finland, Austria, Netherlands. In Italy, there have been many privatization cases. I don't know about Spain. Is it actual there? Probably, some cases at least. So for the cultural politicians to achieve the instrumental goals, the logical thing would be think is that why don't we let the culture managers feel that they are running their own business? Won't they be there more motivated to achieve economic goals, right? So the whole culture scene tends to be organized so that the cultural organizations could be more flexible, and then it will be more easy for them to achieve the economic goals, because they are more motivated to do a good job, and they could raise their own funds, and they could then do more mission-driven activities with this. so that they would feel more free, not so like a public bureaucracy institution anymore. So all the kind of hybrid legal forms have been practiced that are on the borderline of public and private. So this nowadays it's very hard to draw the line. This is public organization and this is private organization. These concepts are all blurred altogether. But from the cultural policy side, if we give the cultural sector more freedom, more flexibility to act business-like ways, then it is still a public good. In most countries, culture is one way or another considered as a public good. It's good for our society, and in most cases it remains under public support. It gets some public funds. So from this point of view, it's still public good, and we have to still control what are they still doing with the public funds. We have to, on one hand, we let them free and more flexible. On the other hand, we need to strengthen the evaluation and measurement, what they actually do. So there's a controversy. And perhaps if you think of the cultural managers, how would they then feel? They have on one side, they have a pressure to be very efficient and effective economically, and act like the very good businesses. But on the other hand, most of the cultural managers have background in arts themselves, and they say that I don't actually mind about the political influences and the neoliberalism or old liberalism. I don't actually mind the institutional setting. It doesn't matter if I'm a head of foundation or a public theatre. I still want to do as good artistic expression as possible and to offer it as many people as possible. So there's most of the arts people and arts managers has to face the influences from outside, but still they want to do their core thing, the core mission thing. So what is the trick then there? You can still do your core thing, but you have to maintain and regain all the time the legitimacy. Legitimacy means, in this context, I mean a broader definition of it. It could be according to laws. Legitimate cultural organization is doing everything by the regulations, by the laws. It represents what it should represent, and it carries the aim that is given to them publicly by the state. So this is legitimate organization. On the other hand, there's a cognitive legitimacy, which means that people, the society, all stakeholders that ever it could be, understand, recognize, and appreciate what a cultural organization or artist does. Cognitive legitimacy means that you have a full support, right to exist. People consider you as a worthwhile thing, that you are valuable by yourself. So, the key is that the maintaining and keeping the legitimacy, you always have to have a social support, social appreciation. You have to have, in the wider sense, the societal impact. The societal impact, meaning that it is all kind of different effects that go beyond the actual artistic experience and that affect the people's lives continuously. Yeah? But how could you do this? How could you have an effect on people's lives beyond the artistic experience? You couldn't do it without really matching or meeting the expectations and values of each of the stakeholder in the society, starting from the different target groups in the audience, politicians, other professionals, community, all the kind of different agents in the society. If you would do something that they don't value or understand or appreciate, there wouldn't be societal impact, and there wouldn't be also instrumental value. You wouldn't be able to produce good economic results if people don't come because they don't appreciate you. It's very simple and logical, right? If you think of yourself as a manager, the first thing would be to map out what are the values and expectation of all the stakeholders that I might influence. And the trick there is that not that you would do then what they expect you to do. Then we end up having commercialized arts as well. But you have to find in your values what and in your activity, what kind of activity actually matches the values. You have to find this kind of side of your activity that matches the certain values and expectations of this concrete stakeholders' values and expectations. And the core thing is, of course, artistic quality. If people don't think you're doing good stuff, they won't come and you won't have any societal impact. So to conclude, if I started with a question how these notions, values, cultural policy, institutional setting and societal is connected, I can conclude very scientifically that everything is connected. And the key point is that I think that there are so much more potential that cultural managers could use, knowing and being aware of the influences of the neoliberal cultural policy and the instrumental values. And the more you recognize that the instrumental side of the triangle is stressed and prioritized, the more you as an artist or as a manager should try to balance the other ends of the triangle to make it more balanced. Because I really believe that it cannot stay for very long that we have this instrumental very much stressed. The society regulates also itself in a time. It takes time, of course, but I'm pretty sure that soon there will be a shift in the priorities and focuses of cultural values. So yeah, as a managers, I think there's a great potential of using this knowledge. What are we affected by, and how could we take the most advantage of the changed institutional setting to use it for our purposes the best way we can. So, thank you.